morning. It is so great to be with everyone on this spring break winter morning. I remember last year when I experienced my first Florida spring break, and by this time, my wife is looking at me. All kids, the kids are looking at me. You guys can go out. You don't have to listen to me. That was a joke. You guys can head on back to Miss Jill right now. Don't worry, we're good to go. We'll let you all do that. But I remember last year during spring break, I asked Floridians, I said, what do you guys do during spring break? You know, I've growing up, people always come down to places like Florida or destinations like that. They don't go to Kansas City for spring break. I don't know why. I mean, we have good barbecue, but the weather's unpredictable, so you can get 4 seasons in Kansas City. But for whatever reason, people don't go to Kansas City. So I asked Floridians, what do you do during spring break? And the number one answer, if we were playing like Family Feud, was hide. They said we just hide during spring break, and it's been a testament to, I can tell already, the traffic. So I was talking to Dan earlier. We were talking about the traffic just being like you got to plan an extra 5 to 10 minutes so far to leave because it is a lot more full. But we're glad to have people here. We're glad that you're here today on daylight savings. You know, I'm changed perspective on daylight savings. You know, when I was growing up, I always thought the fall back was so much better. But then, you know, your kid would you have kids and then their sleep schedule gets messed up. And so when it's normally like 7 o'clock, you know, they think it's like 8 o'clock. And so they're up early. Well, today, Nolan, though, he's an early riser. He's always been an early riser. And one day we'll sleep in and one day I'll cherish this. But we had set the clocks ahead to just kind of get ahead of the schedule. And so he came into our room and we kind of have this rule, hey, Nolan, you can't come into our room until 6:30. You can be up, you can play, you can do whatever you want to do. But 6:30, that's when you can come into our room and wake us up, make sure we're alive and well. But he came in at 7:15. He was so excited. He's like, Dad, I slept in at 7:15. And I'm like, oh, yeah, good job, Nolan. It's more like 6:15, but that's okay. We'll make it work. Well, today we finish our series on Exodus and pioneering God's victories for our lives. And last week we're in the book of Joshua, and we're going to finish off in the book of Joshua. And so you can turn to your Bibles to Joshua 6 if you have them. But how many of you all like phone games, playing games on your phone? Anyone like playing games on their phone? What about video games? Any video gamers, hardcore video gamers? We got some right here. I'm not a huge phone game guy. You know, I'm more checking social media or doing stuff, surfing the web with my phone. But the one time I will play games on my phone is when we fly or travel. And so this past summer we flew back to Kansas City, and it's just maybe one of those things that I kind of do. I don't mind flying. My least favorite part is taking off. There's just something about it that just kind of puts me a little uncomfortable. But anyway, so I usually kind of will play some games. There's no Wi-Fi or anything on like that, and I played this game. It's called Two Dots. Anyone ever played Two Dots? It's kind of like a puzzle game, and those are the kind of the games I like to play. And so I was kind of cruising along, just kind of destroying it. You know, just my high IQ was just shining, and everything was just great. And went to my in-laws, and at night I was kind of addicted to this game, and so I'd be playing this game into the wee hours of the night. And so flying on the way back, I got to this one level that I could not pass, and it was just driving me insane. And somehow, how these games do it. If you can buy more lives, or you can buy power-ups to help you pass these levels. And so they kept tempting me, and I said, no, not today, Satan. And I just kept going through everything like that. But I somehow got this unlimited, 1 day's worth, or I don't know how, 2 hours worth. And so I kept getting stuck on this level. And I don't like quitting, but I, know my frustration levels and know when to say no. But I was having a tough time, and I would get close to passing it and wouldn't pass it. And I was just getting so frustrated. And I just was curious, by just maybe a show of hands, who in here, when you get frustrated, when you get caught on something, do you move on, or do you power through? Who powers through and will not quit until the job is done? Who says, for my sanctity, I will just move on, try at a different level? Okay, yeah, I powered through somehow, and as my basketball coach would say, even a blind mouse finds cheese, and so I found cheese and was able to pass it. But I was thinking of this example as I was looking at Joshua and the Israelites in chapter 6. Here they have left slavery to go into this promised land. God, delivered them through the 10 plagues, and then the parting of the Red Sea, and then they kind of have this oasis time where they relax, and then God takes them to Mount Sinai and gives them the commandments and gives them the law, and they come to scout the land, and ultimately Moses and the generation don't enter because they don't trust God that he will deliver them and lead them into the land. And so Joshua becomes ruler of the Israelites, and they cross the Jordan during a floody season. But here they are in the first city, right when they've crossed the Jordan, they're coming to the promised land, and we read that there is a city fortified with a wall. And so if you have your Bibles, we're just going to read this story. And starting in verse 1 of chapter 6 of Joshua, we'll have it up above. Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or in. But the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king and all its strong warriors. You and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the town 7 times with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priests give one long blast of the ram's horn, have all the people shout as loud as they can, then the walls of the town will collapse, and the people will charge into the town. So Joshua called together the priests and said, take up the ark of the Lord's covenant, and assigned 7 priests to walk in front of it, each carrying a ram's horn. Then he gave the orders to the people, march around the town, and the armed men will lead the way in the ark of the Lord. After Joshua spoke to the people, the 7 priests with the ram's horns started marching in the presence of the Lord, blowing their horns as they marched. And the ark of the Lord's covenant followed behind them. Some of the armed men marched in front of the priest with the horns, and some behind the ark with the priests continually blowing the horns. Do not shout, do not even talk, Joshua commanded. Not a single word from any of you until I tell you to shout, then shout. So the ark of the Lord was carried around the town, and once that day, and then everyone returned to spend the night in the camp. Joshua got up the next morning, and the priests again carried the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests with the ram's horns marched in front of the ark of the Lord, blowing their horns. Again, the armed men marched both in front of the priests with the horns and behind the ark of the Lord. All this time, the priests were blowing their horns. On the 2nd day, they again marched around the town once again and returned to camp. They followed this pattern for 6 days. On the 7th day, the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the town as they had done before. But this time they went around the town 7 times. The 7th time, as the priests sounded their long blast on the horns, Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you this town. Jericho and everything in it must be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. Only Rahab, the prostitute, and the others in the house will be spared, for she protected our spies. Do not take any of the things set apart for destruction, or you yourselves will be destroyed, and you will bring trouble on the camp of Israel. Everything made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron is sacred to the Lord and must be brought to his treasury. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horn, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. They completely destroyed everything in it with their swords, men, women, young, old, cattle, sheep, goats, and donkeys. Let's pray. Dear God, we just thank you so much for this day. We thank you so much for who you are. And God, we just thank you for this word. May you just speak to us in only ways that you can. And God, may it be your words, and may you touch our hearts. We pray these things in your name. I've always loved the story of Joshua, mainly because my namesake came from it. As a kid, when we would read through the story, I would always savor every minute of it because I just loved the story of Joshua. And this is definitely one of my favorite stories. How many of you, I thought about finding it and playing it, how many of you know the song, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho? Anyone know that? Anyone? Okay, well, we're going to sing it afterwards. Not really, but you guys can sing it in your head as it will be in my head now after I've done that. But when I think of this story and just kind of think of the faith and the Lord really spoke to me this week about this story. Man, what perseverance, what faith, what a test of faith for the Israelites. Here you've gone through all this, you've left the promised land, you've gone and seen all that God has done, but you've wandered now for 40 years. And you see here this town that you're in, that the Lord has given to you, but yet here it is fortified, tightly secured. And I think in our lives, I believe we have walls in our lives. In fact, I remember in college, one of our professors, he would talk about, there's these walls, whether it be a marriage issue or dilemma or relational or work, there are these walls, these individual metaphorical walls that we face periodically through our lives. And maybe some of us are facing these walls today. These walls maybe being addiction. Maybe these walls are marriage or relational issues. These walls maybe being maybe walking into a relationship with Jesus for the first time. These walls could be what to do with work. I don't know what my work situation is. And they're maybe not crises, but there are these moments in our lives, and we have really three options when we face these walls, when we face these moments. The first being, we can set aside camp outside these walls and just kind of live life normally or with this wall. So if we have an addiction or marital issues or relational issues or job, career issues that we're trying to figure out, we have the choice of just staying right here and just kind of not messing with this wall and just leaving this wall here. The reality is, though, when we do that, that wall dictates our life. That wall decides everything we do. I can't really grow in my marriage because I got this wall right here. There's only so much land I can take up. I really can't grow in my faith because I have this issue that I'm dealing with that I really don't want to take on. That's one option. The second option is we can go around and try to take up new territory. And we can kind of ignore this issue. Maybe it's hurt, maybe it's anger, maybe it's fear, whatever it may be. We can kind of push it down, push it to the side. But the reality is, even if we go around, even if we try to bypass it, it still dictates our life. Because we're kind of like, I can't touch that subject right here. There's a wall right there. I don't want to address this addiction. I don't want to address this fear. I don't want to address this guilt. I don't want to address this issue. And it dictates our life. Or the third thing is we can knock down these walls. And I believe in our faith, and as we grow in our relationship with God, as we grow in our relationship with Christ, as He brings us to more freedom, there are walls that we need to knock down. And some of you may have walls of fears, walls of doubt, addiction, relational issues, you name it. But what is causing us to knock down our walls? I have 4 points real quickly I will look at. And the first being, our perception is blocked. So one of the reasons walls don't fall in our life is our perception is blocked. We read in verse 1 and 2 of Joshua, "Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or go in. But the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors." Jericho was not a particularly large town. They believe that ancient Jericho would take a little over an hour for someone to walk around. So it wasn't a large town, but it was the first town in Israel that the Israelites came to. And it was, as we read, fortified and tightly shut. Why was it shut? Well, we read it was shut because the people of Jericho were afraid. They had heard and seen what God had done. They had heard and seen all the stories, how God had rescued the Israelites, how God had made a way when there wasn't a way. And so the people of Jericho are afraid of the Israelites. They're so afraid, we read that they make this wall and they secure it tightly. But sometimes our perception gets in the way. Sometimes our perception gets in the way and we only look at the wall and not look at why the wall is there. We only look at the wall in front of us and like, I can't take this on. I can't do this. And we're right to that degree. We can't knock down our walls. We can't personally knock down our walls. It is the Holy Spirit, it is Jesus Christ who knocks down our walls. And it's us having this perception. When we have this perception of what we can do instead of rather what God can do, that is when we get ourselves in trouble. It is our perception on what we face. Maybe your perception is of fear. Your wall is fear. And you may say, well, I can never get over this fear. You know, I have these absolute statements. I would never skydive. Like, to me, that just sounds absolutely crazy. I know people, I'm sure it's a thrill, and some of you here can make fun of me. That's okay. I had a youth, I remember he would give me a hard time. He's like, what if I paid you $100,000 to go skydiving? Would you do it? I said, probably not. He's like, you're insane. And so I was like, I don't know. And maybe that's like, I'm never getting over this fear because I can't. Or this addiction, I can't get over this addiction because I can't fix our marriage. I can't fix this work situation. Whatever this wall may be, it's our perception. We've got to look at things through God's eyes. We've got to look at things that God is with us, that God has already made a way, that God has already provided the resources, that God has the perfect timing in place. It's nothing that we can do, but it's what God is doing through us. Our perception is blocked. And so we can't knock down these walls. Our prayer should be, God, fill me. I can't do this on my own. Lead me. Fill me with your Spirit. It's becoming people that are Spirit-led, not flesh-led. So how do we change our perspective? I think it's reaching out to God, crying out to God, praising God. We talked about this a few weeks back. I believe this is one of the biggest things that we can do. Instead of being people who maybe complain, but people who praise, people who are grateful, that is one of the main reasons we can change our perspective. God, I can't knock down this wall, but God, you can. I give you praise for it. I trust you, God. Hearts of praise lead to hearts of trust, which leads to God working through us and in us. Hearts of complaints, we see all the issues, we see all the deficiencies we have in life. But hearts of praise, we learn to trust God. I'm a very logical thinker, logical, practical person. It doesn't make much sense for me, even coming down here, I'll just use an example I've used it before. Like, it did not make a lot of logical sense to come down here to Florida where we knew no one, and to plant a church where we knew no one in an area where we were not familiar with, and then on top of being in a global pandemic. It doesn't make sense. But that's perspective of man. And like I said last week, I remember telling them, I said, well, that's absolutely crazy and terrifying. But that's how God works sometimes. And when we see things through God's perspective instead of our perspective, we can knock down our walls. The second thing that keeps us from knocking down walls is when progress doesn't seem obvious. When progress doesn't seem obvious. We read in Joshua 6 that they marched around the walls for 6 days. And imagine this, what we don't read is that parts of the wall started to crack. What we don't read is that walls and bricks started falling down. We don't read that at all in Joshua 6. And in fact, we read of no progress as they walk around the wall for 6 days. And you got to think of the people, like, what are they thinking during this time? Like, okay, God, we're walking down the walls, but nothing's coming down. No, we don't see any cracks, God. What's going on? Are you sure this is going to work? But we got to trust that God's working even when the progress doesn't seem obvious for us. For 40 years, the Israelites, they wandered around the desert. They had to cross the Jordan. They're right here. And God has told them, listen, I need you to walk around this town for 7 times. And they don't see a brick moving. They don't see cracks. But they have to have faith. How many of y'all like exercising? Anyone like exercising? A couple people like exercising. I'm torn. There's some days I like it. Other days I don't. But, how many of us would like exercising if we saw instant results? And we're like, if I could just do 20 push-ups, I would look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. We would all do that, right? But if you've ever worked out or exercised, it's a process, right? It just doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes you got to go to the gym and go into regular habits or diet and regular habits, and we want to see results right away. But healthy results don't take place instantaneously. It's that the process, and trusting the process. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 7 says, "For we live by believing and not by seeing." Will you keep walking even when it isn't working? Do we believe that God is working even when the wall isn't moving? When we look at our lives and we look at our walls, and maybe we've been battling something, maybe we've been working on and praying for marriage issues or relational issues or fear or whatever it may be, guilt, hurt, pain, whatever your wall may be. Maybe you've been working on it for years upon years upon years, and you don't see that progress. Do you still believe and trust that God is moving? Do you still believe and trust that God is working through you, even when the progress isn't obvious? I'm very much a type A, get my list. I like seeing things done. Very result-oriented is how I've grown up. I remember, how many of you guys ever did the Book It program through like Pizza Hut? I don't know how many of y'all did that. A few people did that. And for those that didn't do the Book It program, you read a certain amount of books. You could take this in, your teacher would sign off on it, and you would take it to Pizza Hut, and they'd give you your own personal pan pizza. Let me tell you, what motivation for me to read books. And I remember one time in 3rd grade, I was like, man, I'm craving some pizza. And so I just claimed I read books. I really just kind of skimmed through them. My teacher kind of got after me. And she just laughed at me, like, you are so much, get things done as quickly as possible, and that's who I am. And so one of the most difficult things for me is this point right here. When progress doesn't seem obvious, maybe in our marriage, when progress doesn't seem obvious in what God's called you to do, when progress doesn't seem obvious when we're fighting addiction, do we trust God? Do we leave camp? Do we try to move on? Do we just say, okay, well, this wall isn't going to ever come down. I'm just going to live with it? Or do we keep working and keep trusting God? The third reason that we don't see the wall fall down is because we lose hope that the process is open-ended. The Israelites, we read through this story, God tells Joshua the plan. He says, for 6 days, you're going to march around and do nothing. And on the 7th day, we're going to march around, and then the rams are going to blow the horn, and the priests are going to blow the rams' horns, and we're all going to shout. And then the walls are going to come down. Joshua doesn't relay these instructions to the people. And I can't imagine what it must have been like to be the people walking around the wall. You don't see any cracks. You don't see any shifting of the ground. You don't see any bricks falling down. And you just kind of do this for 6 days, no progress. And they don't know how long they're going to do it. God tells Joshua, but he doesn't tell the people. And maybe you felt like that with the wall that you're facing with. You have this wall in your life and you're like, God, how long am I going to fight this wall? How long until this is going to get knocked down? How long until we can overcome this? How long? But the reality is the process is open-ended with God. The process is open-ended. Stephen Furtick says, obedience is our responsibility. The outcome is God's. You see, what God's asking us to do is to be obedient. He's got the resources. He's got the time. He's got the people put in place. Our job is to be obedient. God's going to knock down the walls, but so many times what we try to do is we try to kind of fix things. At least I'll speak for myself. What I like to try to do is try to make results happen myself. But the reality is only God can make the results happen, the results that need to happen. And sometimes the process is open-ended. Sometimes the process doesn't end when we want it to end. And God has asked us, do you trust me? Do you trust me? Do you trust me? Romans 8:31 says, what shall we say about such wonderful things? If God is for us, then who can ever be against us? And then in Hebrews 10:36, patient endurance is what you need so that you will continue to do God's will. Then you will receive all that he has promised. Patient endurance. And sometimes maybe we've been praying for something for so long. We've been trying to do the steps for so long, and we don't understand, God, you've called us to do something, and we don't see this, no end in sight. Like, I mean, if God said, hey, if you just do this here for the next 3 weeks or the next 3 months, results are going to come your way. How many of us would do it? We would sign up for it. But when we don't know when the results are going to happen, when we don't know when we see the progress, it becomes difficult and we stop. But don't stop. And the last thing that I think prevents us from knocking down these walls is we are unsure of what's on the other side. We don't know what's on the other side. It's unknown to us. And it's maybe uncomfortable for us. The Israelites knew that there's land to take, and obviously they've been waiting for this land. And so they walk down and they shout, and the walls come tumbling down. But for some of us, we kind of like and understand, and we've had these walls in our life for so long that we're comfortable with them. We can manage the fear. We can manage the guilt. We can manage the pain. We can manage the dysfunctional relationships. We can manage the addiction. We can manage this basic level of faith. And we kind of like, yeah, maybe this wall doesn't need to fall. I got a good life right now. Yeah, I can kind of manage things. But God's trying to lead us into new freedoms and new victories and new promises. Imagine if the Israelites said, you know what, God, this is nice and everything, but we're just going to stay here, right here on the cusp of the promised land. We're going to build a camp and pitch camp right here on the promised land. Imagine that. We read that that's not what they did. No, they went into the unknown. They trusted God, and they knocked down these walls. Maybe some of us are holding on to the walls because we're unsure of what's going to happen once those walls knock down. We're unsure what our marriages will look like. We're unsure what our families will look like. We're unsure what our work situation will look like. We're unsure of so much. But God is the God of the unknown, and God knows all things. And even though we may not know all the answers, God does. and God is working, if God is leading you, we've got to trust in Him. So many times we hold on to the things we know and the things we're comfortable with, when God is trying to lead us into new freedoms. I'm going to invite the band to come on up, and we're going to close here. God, we give you praise right now. And God, as we reflect on this story, as we reflect on this series, God, we recognize that you have led us, you are leading us into new promises. And God, sometimes the land that you're leading us to does not make sense. Sometimes the things that you're calling us to don't make sense. And sometimes the things that you're asking us to give up, the walls that you're asking us to knock down, are walls that are deep-seated issues of hurt, of pain, of guilt, of fear, of addiction, of unsurety. And God, it can be difficult to give up and to knock down these walls. I mean, easy to stop because our perception gets skewed and obstructed. And we look at things through our own eyes instead of the eyes of God. The God who can do all things. And God, maybe we stop because we don't see any progress. We've been praying, we've been working, we've been trying, but nothing seems to be coming out of it. We've tried to make these steps to overcome this fear, take these steps to work on our relationships, but nothing comes about it. And God, it just feels like we've been working and working and working for years, for months. But God, we thank you, though, for you being a good God and loving us and empowering us and giving us freedom so that we can knock down walls, so that we can experience hope, so that we can experience freedom. So God, give us strength, give us courage, that we may see the unknown, we may know and hear about the unknown, that we may go running into it because you are there with us. May we not stop, and may we build our life on the cornerstone of Jesus Christ. Amen.